Good morning, everyone. I'll go ahead and start with taking attendance of commissioners. Prachi Dave, not present.
Actually won't be able to attend this morning.
Prachi will not be here this morning. Thank you. Reverend Patricia Hunter, I see you on the
Present.
morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Reverend Harriet Walden is to my right.
Present. Good morning.
Douglas Wagner, not present. Joseph Saya, not present. Alina Santillan.
Present.
Hi, good morning, Alina. Erica Newman.
Present.
Good morning, Erica. Tasha Johnson. Not present. Lajaya Washington. Not present. Suzette Dickerson.
Present.
Good morning, Suzette.
Good morning.
Officer Mark Mullins.
Officer Mark Mullins is present.
Good morning, Officer Mullins. Joel Merkel, I am here. Good morning, everyone. And Commissioner Jeremy Wood. Jeremy Wood, are you present? Not present. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. In the materials that were circulated, I believe yesterday, a draft agenda for today's meeting, as well as the minutes from November 2nd's meeting were circulated. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve today's draft agenda. Is there such a motion?
With the chair and approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Reverend Walden. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Reverend Hunter. Is everyone in favor of approving today's agenda as sent out last night? Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please say nay. Any abstentions? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and today's agenda is approved. The next item of business is to approve the minutes from the November 2nd meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as circulated?
I move that we accept the minutes from the November 2nd meeting as distributed.
Thank you, Reverend Hunter. Is there a second?
I'll go ahead and second.
Thank you, Suzette. All in favor of approving the minutes from November 2nd, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Thank you, everyone. Just wanted also make a quick note about the agenda. We have a busy agenda today, as you just noticed from approving the agenda. We have a number of discussions to have, a number of updates, and we did not schedule public comment time this morning. However, we are still accepting public comment on today's agenda. There is a CPC email address that you can direct public comments to that we are monitoring. And Director Grant, can you remind us what that email address is, please?
It's cpc@seattle.gov.
ocpc@seattle.gov. ocpc@seattle.gov. If you have any public comments, please send your comments to that email address. Thank you. And with that, that brings us to the first item on the agenda, and I'll introduce it as such. Councilmember Herbold, from what I can understand, reached out to the Police Commission regarding two items within the budget. They relate to regional peacekeepers and alternatives to 911. There has been some communication between the CPC staff and Councilmember Herbold's office related to those issues. And I'd like at this time to go ahead and introduce Callie Ellis on our CPC staff to present on where we are on those two particular items that Councilmember Herbold's office has asked the commission about.
Sure. And I just want to note that Newell from Councilmember Herbold's office is also here. So Newell, feel free to jump in once we get to that portion. So I'm Callie Ellis. I'm the new policy director. You might remember me from the last meeting. And I just wanted to point out big picture where we are in the process with the city council budget. So right now, at this very moment, counselors are submitting amendments to the budget because the deadline for submitting any amendments to the balancing budget that Chair Mosqueda presented on Monday is noon today. So they're pretty busy, and therefore I really appreciate Newell taking the time to be at this meeting as well. So as you know, the balancing budget was submitted on Monday, and then they're in the process. There was public testimony that was collected yesterday, starting at 5 p.m. and also online. And I know some community members and commissioners submitted part of that public testimony. So thank you for doing that. But right now we're very much in the middle of a process that is not done yet. So a lot of these things are going to be kind of up in the air. But when Director Grant first reached out to Councilmember Herbold in response to her request for support for a couple of items, we had a letter and we've had some back and forth that was in the attached meeting agenda items. So hopefully you had a chance to review that, but we've also had an update from Councilmember Herbold. So let me give you sort of the big picture of that. There were two pieces that she was looking at as amendments to the budget, again, at that time, that she was looking for support from the commission on. And the first one was about 911 dispatch alternatives. So at the time, and this has changed, there were two components to that. One was about dual dispatch, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the other one was about expanding CSOs. Both of these were going to be in the CSCC, the Communication Safety Center budget. So this is dispatch. That's where the money was going to go. The CSO component has been removed, but the dual dispatch program is still going forward. This is based on a work group that's been going on between the mayor's office and legislative staff, specifically looking at dual dispatch as an alternative to dispatching police. That's something that seems to be clear in what they've written up and what they presented to us. So this is not expanding, for example, the crisis response team or the crisis intervention trained officers. This is a completely new set of people, mental health professionals, that would be dispatched out of CSCC. And that's what a lot of Director Grant's comments and questions were about, because CSCC is a dispatching agency. They have technology, they have call takers, and they have dispatchers, but they don't have mental health professional staff or necessarily the capability to hire them. So that's what's been going on in the back and forth. The most recent response from Councilmember Herbold's office, and again, feel free to jump in, Newell, was that, first of all, the CSOs have been removed from that request. And second of all, that this is going forward based on this term sheet from the work group that talks about this completely separate group of people that's going to be dispatched out of CSC. So I'm going to read a little bit of what it says so you get a sense of what they're thinking. So it's the intent of the council that it would be completely independent of the Seattle Police Department and meet a discrete community identified need, not redundant with current 911 response, nor with any emergent 911 response, and responsive to the results of the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform calls for service analysis and the risk management demand analysis that's currently in progress at SPD. So that's completely separate. And the amount of money, because overall the balancing budget has been reduced because of the reduced revenue forecast, has gone down. So the last response from Councilmember Herbold's office is that it would be $717,000 in CSCC, and the rest of the funding is in the general fund. Newell, do you want to jump in on this answer?
Sure. Thanks for that information, Callie. Just a few points of clarification. There is a starting point for funding for 911 alternatives of $1.9 million that is listed in Finance General, and that's just more or less a place where funds can be parked until they are distributed to a department. So at the very end of this budget item, it authorizes spending in 2023 on the dual dispatch that Callie mentioned. And it would not be estimated to spend all of those funds. The $717,000 that is added for 2024. So it is funding that is additive to that 1.9 million. So it provides some funding for 2024. Part of the challenge in developing this is that the mayor's proposed budget was completed by the time that the council staff and mayoral staff, working with the SPDs also involved in, came up with the proposals for alternatives. So consequently, to release funding for that, there needed to be a budget amendment, and everybody understood that the council was going to need to move something forward in order to authorize spending for this year. Also, the reason this is limited just to the dual dispatch is because that's where funding is going to be spent for 2023 for the development of potential expansion of the CSO program. Planning work is scheduled for next year, but no funding is required for that. There's a separate element of the fire department's Health One program, looking at potential expansion to the call types that they could respond to that does not need any funding at this time either. So that's why funding is limited just to the dual dispatch program. Originally, it seemed that there was a need to spend some money for the CSO program next year to consider expansion, but that's not the case. So that's why the CSO program is not mentioned in this budget action. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to clarify, from my understanding of the most recent budget action, and again, this is all kind of up in the air, the $717,000 is for this set of dispatch people that does not include the police at all. But there's also a proviso there that the $1.9 million is appropriated solely to support a specified project that expands 911 emergency response and may be spent for no other purpose. That project is the dual dispatch of sworn officers and civilian staff to augment current response to calls with a mental behavioral health nexus. So there is the larger amount of money appears to be with this proviso, but again, this is not final, appears to be for something that would include a police response, but the $717,000 is for something that specifically excludes any police response. Both of those in CSCC. So moving on to the second part of the letter, you will notice that we asked some questions about another thing that Councilmember Herbold's office had asked for support for, which was specifically support for the Regional Peacekeepers Program. This is a county level program. And we had some questions about what that looks like and what the support has come from in the past. And the last response that has not been shared, but we just got from Councilmember Herbold's office was very helpful. King County announced the formation of Regional Peacekeepers Collective in June 2021, and then Councilmember Mosqueda and Councilmember Herbold sponsored a budget amendment to provide $500,000 in 2021 funding. And so in 2022, the city budget contributed $1.5 million, and the balancing package, what we're working with now, has a revised version of the proposal, which was, it was originally $600,000, but now it's down to $300,000. As you may have noticed with the decreased revenue forecast, a lot of these are a little bit lower, but it's still support for the program. The second set of questions from Director Grant had to do with the effectiveness of the program. So the expansion of the RPKC is to people that are older than who is already being served, which is currently it's people in the 18 to 24 age range. This based on data from Harborview that there's a lot more people in an older age range that need these kind of services as well, was the impetus, is our understanding, for this request for additional funding. And the idea, because it's such a very different population with completely different needs, is, as far as I understand, that this money would be used as a pilot for this newer group. I would certainly welcome Newell to give us more clarification on that. Is it a pilot or is it not?
Sure, the funds are designed to develop the program and expand the Regional Peacekeepers Program, working toward funding for a permanent program in the following year's budget.
So is that a pilot because it's with the larger group?
That's a good question. I don't think it's seen as a pilot. I think it's seen as a necessary expansion to address the incidents of gun violence in the older population.
So one of the questions that Director Grant had that was answered in the most recent version of the letter is that the question was, what is the measures of effectiveness for this program? And that is going to be, from my understanding, part of this proposed funding for RPKC for next year. Are there any questions about this or about other aspects of the budget process that you may have heard about?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, Reverend.
But Suzette hands it up. to
Oh,
And I-
yeah, Suzette hands up. Go ahead, Suzette.
So, yes, I'm not sure if everybody is aware, there has been news articles that have been put out in regards to one of the entities of the regional peacekeepers, which is Renegades for Life, where Salim Robinson, who is a convicted sex offender, had falsified his credentials with University of Washington and also Seattle University. So my concern is that, you know, not only with the effectiveness of the program, but also the vetting process of those individuals who are within the program. Because, you know, like for government agencies, there's a high vetting process. You have to go through background checks and everything. What my understanding is, from what I'm hearing, is that there is not a vetting process, and that we don't know who's really operating these programs and running them, and what is the accountability measures for said programs. I have a concern because, you know, we are here to also listen to the community, which right now there's a big outpour in regards to safety within the community. So my question is, have those issues been resolved, and is there a vetting process? Or are we just is the thought to just hand these, this organization money without there being any kind of accountability or a vetting process? Because, you know, at the end of the day, then are we putting more folks in more risk? Or what's really going on?
Thanks for that question. I know Councilor Herbold has raised that. And what we've heard is that originally it sounds like the county which runs this process did not engage in full vetting. And I believe the program and the county have now worked out which of the partners are going to be doing vetting for the different levels of this. I could get you more information about that, but that's what we heard, that they are going to be engaged in vetting moving forward and have done some at this point.
Right. I guess my question would then be, if there is a vetting process, does it rise to the level of what the government would do as their vetting process? Is there a background check and all that that's being done? I mean, you know, those things are important when we're talking about working with, working not only as a community, but working for the community and the accountability, because, you know, there still has to be some sort of accountability measures put in place.
From what I understand, I think background checks are part of that vetting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzette. Reverend Walden.
Yeah, my question is about what are the deliverables? It seems to me that that a lot of money has gone to a lot of different places, and the violence has not stopped. I mean, it has increased, and so are there any places where there is where they've interrupted the violence? I mean, I'm concerned that we have a lot of money going to stop the violence and coming out a lot of different places, but it has not been effective. And because there's blockage of other places, other other avenues that might yield more to deter violence, and those avenues that seem to be blocked. But I'm real concerned about the fact that the violence is escalating. With all with the regional peacekeepers, I mean, with all the other programs out there, how do these programs keep young people from getting their hands on weapons again? How do they? There's no way to compel people who are going through these programs. So without any ways to compel them, how do you measure a program this way? So that's my concern about it. That's all. Because as I say, I sit with mothers whose children have who've been whose children have been murdered, and so I'm just wondering, what is the effectiveness of it, and how is it being measured? And sometimes every 30 years, lots of money comes to our community. Rodney King, money came to the community, and now this is the generation later. A lot of money is coming to the community, but where are what's the results of it? Because the body count is still going up.
There was a question that came up in a July briefing on King County Public Health's approach involving the Regional Peacekeepers Project, and the response they gave was that I believe there were 4 or 5 different areas they mentioned. One was needs assessment of injuries, measurements for resilience, safety, likelihood of re-injury from gun violence, whether people have been able to get back in school or get jobs, and not being re-involved in a cycle of violence.
Well, that approach it has one element that's missing, and this is spirituality. I mean, we can talk about it as healthcare model all we want to, but if we don't introduce spirituality back into the lexicon in the African American community, in the community that has ingrained oppression and all of these things that is compounding our issues. It's been spirituality that has led our people through our journey for 400 years, and all of these other programs funding does not even have a monicum of spirituality in them. Not one iota of spirituality in them. And that's the missing piece. I mean, we as the people who absolutely believe that, and it's missing in all of these components. Thank you.
Thank you,
I just
Reverend.
want to jump in, just one last thing, is that this really speaks to the need in terms of what effectiveness is for program evaluations to be built into each component of spending. We were pleased looking at the letter, the most recent letter from Councilmember Herbold, that this proposed funding includes an assessment. And so hopefully that would be a program evaluation. This is my background. That would look at quantitative and qualitative measures of the effectiveness of these programs compared to other ways that money can be spent to reduce gun violence and gun violence out.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners that have any questions or comments on the 2 budget items we've been discussing, the 911 dispatch alternatives and the regional peacekeepers?
I have a question.
Yes, Officer Mullins.
Yeah. In the presentation, I heard the words risk management. Now, the question is, what does that mean? Does that mean risk management to the crisis personnel who may be responding in this dual response type dispatching? Or what does that risk management mean? What
The language that's
anybody tell me?
from City Council is specifically referring to the risk management demand, the RMD analysis that's currently in progress at SPD.
Okay, so I'm still not understanding. So is the risk management a study of what the risk is to crisis personnel responding to calls, or is it risk to officers as well, or what is the analysis?
Well, unfortunately, I can't put anything in the chat, but I'm happy to share with you, officer, later on over email, the actual what's being done in the SPD's R&D right now. That has much more details. And this is something that's really key between the risk management demand analysis and then the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform call for service analysis. The difference between those two has been a key point of discussion amongst City Council. And so when it comes to dual dispatch and dual dispatch type responses. So I will be happy to send that to you over email. And hopefully that will answer your question.
Okay. Hopefully, our dispatch and 911 can improve before that dual response from dispatch happens, because they're already struggling.
Newell, do you have any insight on Officer Mullen's question?
For the risk managed demand study, it does assess risks for responders. I'm sorry, was there another question?
Does it include risk for officers or the other responders? I think that was.
Right. I think it was more about like risk management for who, like the responders and.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
responders have principally been police officers so far. I believe it uses an assessment of data with various measurements that are, say, high risk, and assesses a level of risk based on probable incidents, and categorizes those calls. And I believe it is principally for responders.
Reverend Walden has, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
My concern was more so for the civilians and crisis people who were responding to these the mental calls that officers are responding to. If you are attempting to try to get crisis personnel to go to these calls, it definitely needs to be a risk assessment done, because we're finding that most of our crisis personnel are not able to respond to these calls. We are still answering mental crisis calls. We're still answering them without mental health professionals being there. It's not a response that's happening in terms of them replacing us to handle calls. We're still handling the same volume of calls in the mental health aspect, just to make people aware.
Thank you, Officer Mullen.
you.
Suzette, I see your hand is up, Suzette.
I guess I would like to get a little bit more clarity in regards to what is the intent. So what are they really trying to do? Are they trying to say that mental health professionals are supposed to be going into these scenes without police officers present? Or are they saying that it's going to be a joint venture? What is it that really that we're trying to move towards? Because, again, then I would have another concern, because, would we really send folks into a scene without there being, without the scene, without the scene being safe, right? So would we be putting people more in harm's way? With like bystanders or the mental health professional, if there were no police presence there? I'm just trying to really wrap my head around about what the true intent is. at this point and what they're trying to make the program look like and what they are really trying to assess.
Newell, yeah, thank you.
Sure, I think just at a high level, it's to assess which calls must be responded to by a police officer, which calls, for example, would need the crisis response team where you do have a civilian responder, but that is with a police officer. That's a program that exists now, but it's somewhat limited. And then other types of 911 calls that could have this dual dispatch where a civilian responder and would respond, but there would also be a police officer that could be nearby or at the least have, very least have situational awareness. And then be informed if there was a need for them to be on that scene. And then are there other calls where an officer response is not needed? For things such as, for example, taking reports.
Thank you, Newell. Eric, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. I'm listening, and I want a little bit more information, and that's something that can be sent to me offline. But a couple of things that come to mind are the crisis responders, if you will. If they go into these situations, what are the not requirements, but more or less the qualifications that each individual should have? I think I go back to the the thought of, I hear over and over that we want trauma-informed, culturally responsive individuals with lived experience or without, but somebody that the person in crisis can relate to. If one of my thoughts are, if we say that we want somebody with lived experience to interact with those who are going through the same type of experience, he or she or they may not pass the background check. So I just kind of want to put that out there on what we're asking for people to come equipped with. What are we willing to be flexible on in terms of getting results in tracking progress? Is the council considering any type of proviso reports or expenditure restrictions if they're afraid if people are afraid money is going to be spent on what it's not intended?
Thank you, Erica. Great question. Newell, do you have any insight on that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that question. Could you say that again, Erica? Sorry about that.
No worries. Like I said, I was just listening in, and I think there's some concern on the ability to track progress of these types of opportunities, programs, et cetera. And just wondering if the council has considered either proviso responses or expenditure restrictions for those who are worried the money may not be spent for what it's meant for. And back to Reverend Walden's point of, I think our youth and some of our adults have lost the way of what spirituality has done for generations before them. I guess another thing we could, or not we, but that could be considered is thinking about looking back on data from maybe the early 2000s and possibly the 90s on what programs were available then that aren't available now. And if those programs aren't available now, is there something close to it? Like Reverend Walden said, churches and other religious places have served a purpose, but I don't know, what local, I guess, religious organizations are offering, but may not hurt to do maybe some community engagement to see if there are programs or plans or ideas that they're exploring that better serve the community. Thanks.
Well, First of all, in the previous programs, there was a Seattle Youth Violence Prevention Initiative from 2009 that ended in 2015. Perhaps unfortunate. They can certainly pass on suggestion about looking at programs before that.
Are there, thank you, Newell. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners on these two budget items? Reverend Walden?
Anecdotally, on the one about the social workers, it's my understanding that a lot of social workers wasn't willing to sometimes go out and on some of the calls because they're not paid to take the risk. So I think that, and I'm sure that's part of what this pilot, this other program might be about is to see how they can feel more safe or feel safe going out on these calls. And again, you know, when crisis intervention was first set up back in 1997 and 98, at that time it was based on the Portland model, and it did have MSWs that was always there, and they were there with the police officers all the time in the Portland model. When it came to Seattle, that piece it was there, but it wasn't entrenched as it was down in Oregon. And also, I just wanted to have a little comment about the 911 call center. I mean, there's a lot of problems with the 911 call center as it is right now. It was in the police department because it fitted there. I mean, because most of the calls, the weight of the calls was dispatched. And with the untimely shooting and the death of Devon Pickett, the dispatch went to one location first, lost 4 minutes before it was dispatched to the right place. And so there's some real problems with the 911 call center that has not been really brought to the surface. We have all the people who want to pull everything apart, but did not understand there was a reason why almost all 911 call centers are embedded within the police department because of the way that the calls have to be dispatched. So that's just an aside and a comment. There's a problem still with the 911 call center. It does fit better in the police department because that's how they're trained to be able to dispatch the calls and stuff. So, but anyway, that's just one person's opinion. That's all.
Thank you, Reverend Walden. I want to wrap this section up, but I actually have a process question for Newell. As a co-chair, Newell, my understanding is that there was a request that came into the CPC staff from Councilmember Herbold's office that that the CPC consider these two budget items, 911 dispatch and regional peacekeepers, and as proposed, and potentially consider supporting it. And you know, I know that informal request staff to staff, I believe, was made. Are you able to speak to specifically in this public meeting what Councilmember Herbold is asking the commission to do and what she's looking for?
That's a good question. I think a request was, as you noted, to consider supporting it,
Okay,
to support budget actions.
understood. Well, for the CPC to take an official position like that certainly would require a vote. From what I've heard from this discussion, and this is just my observation from commissioners, and if there's a commissioner that disagrees with me, please, you know, raise your hand and correct me. I'm hearing folks that have some questions. I'm hearing folks that want to learn more. And so from what I can tell, I'm not sure whether the commissioners are ready to vote on it. If I'm wrong, please let me know. If folks do feel ready to vote on it and do want to take a position on these things right now, please, this is the time to let me know, and we could amend the agenda to try and take a vote on that. But from what I'm understanding, folks are still looking for a little more information and are not sure, you know, where they fall on these two matters. If that is incorrect, please raise your hand and correct me. Reverend Hunter.
Thank you. I think in principle, I agree with the program and would like to support it, but I am hearing a lot of questions from the commissioners on vetting and background checks and effectiveness of the program and evaluation tools. And so because of all of the questions, I don't think we're at a place yet that we could take a vote to actually support the program, but in principle, I like it.
Newell, can you tell us what the timeline is? I mean, looking at the calendar, the next CPC meeting is, at least a few weeks away. So can you tell us what the council's budget timing is on these two items?
Sure. Originally, the budget was planned to be approved on the 21st, but when the revenue forecast came in earlier this month that showed a shortfall in projected tax revenues, the process was delayed a week. So instead, next Monday, the 21st, there will be discussion of council amendments and amendments to the chair's balancing package, and then a final vote on the 28th of November, Monday the 28th.
Okay,
So we don't
right.
have-
But just
And all, go ahead.
the deadline for the amendments is noon today? Is that
And
correct?
this, the items that are up that you're discussing today are included in the chair's balancing package. So they come from a previous round of amendments that the budget chair then incorporated into a what's called a balancing package that she presented on Monday. So the amendments that you're talking about, Callie, are amendments to the chair's balancing package.
Is there any more time for input from the
Well,
commission?
the deadline for amendments to the chair's balancing package is noon, but input can come anytime up till the final vote.
Thank you, Newell. Well, I don't hear any motion from any of the commissioners to take this up and to vote on it at this time. So at this time, there's no action to amend the agenda or to take a vote on either of these budget items. But I do want to just emphasize, Newell, how much we appreciate you being available as a resource to us and answer these questions. It's and also, I know you did a lot of work over the last couple of weeks responding to staff questions on these matters as well. So I just want to emphasize our appreciation for that.
Thank you.
We did go over a little bit, well, quite a bit actually, on the action items. I thought that was a helpful discussion. Fortunately, I don't believe our commission updates are very lengthy and that we can get to the discussion of ShotSpotter expeditiously. That brings us to the co-chair updates. I'll go ahead and defer to Reverend Hunter or Reverend Walden. At this time, I don't have any updates for the commission other than just sounding like a broken record at nearing the end of the year and trying to get work groups going back again. And I do understand that we have some new commissioners that are being nominated for council consideration. So we should be getting some new commissioners at the beginning of the year, and that's really what I envision as a great target to reconstitute the work groups and get them back and running. But I'll go ahead and be quiet and ask Reverend Hunter and Reverend Walden if they have any updates.
I think I'm pretty much just parroting what you're saying about the work groups, and we've asked commissioners to let us know which work group you would like to serve on. But if we don't hear from you, then the co-chairs will just assign. But we would like to know where your particular interest is, but if we don't hear from you, we won't know. But the expectation is that every commissioner serves on a work group. We also sent out some emails and forms asking for those whose terms are going to be ending but are up for, you can stay on for an additional period of time to send us back your responses. And I think we're still missing a couple of those responses from individuals about whether you want to continue and your level of commitment. So if you are one of those individuals, if you could please get back to us, that would be helpful. I think that's it. Thanks, Joe.
And thank you, Reverend Hunter. Reverend Walden does not have anything. With that, Director Grant.
Thank you. Good morning again, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I just have a couple of updates, and then I'm going to turn over updates to staff to give some departmental updates. I wanted you all to know that there will be a couple of reach outs to commissioners and for the purposes of auditing the website. So for folks that we don't have bios and photos on, we'll be reaching out about those. And then also to, as the co-chairs mentioned about the work groups, we will be circulating a matrix that explains the different work group opportunities there are, who was originally assigned to those previously, and kind of where we're at as far as any holes or gaps, and then what work groups we'll be bringing back online and prioritizing. And two of those primarily will be, unless we have any other indication from commissioners, it will be state legislative agenda, and it will be the complaint and appeals process.
Thank you, Director Grant. Do you have staff updates?
Whoever would like to.
Go ahead, Felicia.
Good morning, everyone.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So as far as staff updates for the community, I lost my train of thought. Engagement. We have in our last round, the second round of interviews today for a second specialist for community engagement, and then our department will be fully staffed, and we have a lot of things that will be coming forward as far as planning and getting more involved with community activities and events and things like that. So more to come. We will be coming for you commissioners to start engaging and, you know, keeping track of the community activities that you are a part of, and community activities that you know, we can account for in our annual report. And we have a great team now that's really working on our brand and putting us out there on the map, and people understanding and knowing who CPC is. And so it's super exciting right now. And so the last of those interviews are today. And then also I would just like to mention that we canceled the community engagement meeting on the 12th this month, the regular second Tuesday, because of the out of respect for the school shooting that had happened earlier that day. But it was we had an overwhelming response to people interested in the topic that was put forth, and that is the King County Medical Examiner, the director. He is going to do a presentation on the gun violence from his point of view, and in the resources available through the medical examiner's office that a lot of common everyday people don't really know about. And so there were close to 70 people signed up for that presentation. And so we are going to have it again. We rescheduled it for the 29th of November. So the last Tuesday of this month at 6 o'clock, and it's virtual. I'll be sending out the notices, the information about it soon. So please share the information. If you have any topics, I say it every time, if you have any topics that you want to bring to community engagement, please don't hesitate to let us know what you would like to hear about. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia.
Any other department updates?
I can jump in. I have a couple things from policy. So I'll start first building off of what you said about the need for work groups. So there are 2 new people at the Office of Intergovernmental Relations at the city, Samir Junehu, who's from the Senate, and Anna Johnson. And so the city, and this is talking to the state legislature because that session starts next year, The city is still open to getting some input into priorities that they can lobby for on behalf of the city. So with the idea in mind of standing up the work group, the legislative work group for next year, and anyone that's interested in this, if there's any ideas or anything that you want to share, our deadline is next Tuesday, November 22nd to OIR. And so if there's anything that you would like to elevate to things that should be on the legislative agenda at the state level right now, that's our deadline. And I would love to hear from you. Please just get in touch with me directly, Kali.ellis@seattle.gov. And so the second item is we had a meeting, Director Grant and I, with Councilmember Nelson and her staff, and she brought up the idea of something that I wanted to ask all of you about, which is a theme meeting about different parts of the community. So today's theme is going to be about ShotSpotter, but she suggested a theme meeting bringing members from the community to talk about the effect of crime on small businesses and police response for small businesses, actual community members from small businesses in Seattle. And so I wanted to see if that was something that was of interest to you, possibly as the beginning of a number of theme meetings addressing the needs of different parts of the community. For example, domestic violence survivors, crimes against college students, the LGBTQ community, et cetera. But this is the first one that came to us. And I just wanted to see if there's an interest in having a theme meeting around the needs of small business and crime.
I think that's a good idea because in the past, we've also always had a person on the commission who represented the Downtown Business Associates, other business. And I don't think anyone replaced Aaron Goodman seat. And in the beginning, it was Keith. We've always had a business person and bring in what was happening in the business arena. So I think themes would be good. That's another way to get more community involvement. I mean, everybody. There's a lot of ideas in the Black community. I mean, about people believing that everybody in the Black community don't like the police, or they only want to defund the police, and so I think just bringing in other people also, because everybody's living in the same community, but they have a variety of different ideas. I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other department updates before we move on?
Megan, you want to give any communications updates?
Well, we are starting interviews with Brandy and experts, and we completed our first interview yesterday, and I'm very excited to produce those videos and a future podcast and connect with the community on what we're working on and what we're finding out.
Good work.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? I'm not aware of any new business. Is there any new business? Okay, well, that brings us to the next item on our agenda, the discussion of ShotSpotter. We have, my understanding is we have some information that Logan's going to provide us. And then we also have a couple guests from Portland to join us. There's a couple notes that I wanted to make just at the top of the discussion. The first thing I'd like to note is that, there is a city ordinance, the City of Seattle surveillance ordinance that was passed in 2017, 2018, which governs the acquisition of new surveillance technology within the city. And we've taken a brief look at it. I asked Commissioner Jeremy Wood to take a look at it as well. And the understanding that we have is that the surveillance ordinance requires the mayor's office and the Seattle Police Department to go through a process that is outlined in the surveillance ordinance and produce a report and solicit public input before the city is legally permitted to adopt a surveillance technology such as gunshot detection like ShotSpotter. That's our understanding. I haven't done a deep legal analysis or a deep dive of it myself, but that seems, from what we can tell, that seems to be on point. So With respect to the city adopting it, at this point, it seems as though it may be premature, given the surveillance ordinance. That's number one. Number two, as folks on the call probably know, yesterday the city council published their balancing budget. And within their balancing budget, there was an amendment that was proposed to remove the mayor's proposed pilot on gunshot detection. So as far as the council is concerned, that particular proviso is, or particular budget item is no longer currently in the budget, at least to the city council. So I just wanted to make those two notes up front, just to kind of, those are important things to know as we discuss this policy. I don't expect the discussion to end anytime soon. I expect we're going to continue discussing it and hearing from the community. I know Felicia was at a meeting with the community a couple days ago. In fact, there was a feature on Como News reporting on it, and Felicia was interviewed. I saw that segment yesterday, and I thought Felicia did a fantastic job. Thank you, Felicia. And one part of the discussion for today is, our neighbors down south in Portland have an experience with ShotSpotter, and we've invited them to come talk to us to tell us about their experience with ShotSpotter, to provide us a little more information as Seattle engages with this discussion. So I just want to put those things up front to frame the discussion. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Logan. I understand he has some additional information to provide following last meeting's discussion. Go ahead, Logan.
I do. Thank you, Joel. All right, I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully everybody can see it. Let me get some stuff out of the way. So as Joel mentioned, as Commissioner Merkel mentioned, back in October, I gave a budget analysis presentation regarding Mayor Harrell's proposed budget to 2023 and 2024. And unfortunately, I did make two inaccurate statements that I would like to correct now. But before I make those corrections, it's important to do a little bit of a historical context. So ShotSpotter, or the acquisition of a gunfire detection system, has been around in Seattle for a good amount of time. Discussions around implementing a GDS pilot, gunfire detection system pilot, has been around since about 2014, with a really large focus in 2016. And in 2021, the mayor's office hosted a listening session that engaged impacted family members who have lost loved ones, specifically children, to gun violence in the city. And that work group favored the implementation of a gunfire detection system. And they referenced multiple unsolved homicides in the Seattle's Rainier Beach area. As well, previously, when Tim Burgess was a council member, along with Mayor Harrell being a council member, there were efforts to place a GDS system in South Seattle communities, specifically Rainier Beach. And so that historical context has really impacted the current discussions around a GDS pilot, and the community and media, as well as myself, misappropriated that the pilot that was in the proposed 2023-2024 budget would be placed in Rainier Beach. However, that is not correct. There was no geographical region that has been identified. So the slide that you see now are the two different statements that I had made back in October. The first one being that during the overview of Mayor Harrell's proposed budget, I had said that the GDS pilot would be placed in a South Seattle community. As I just mentioned, that is not correct. The correct statement is that there is no geographical region that has been identified. And as Joel mentioned, due to the surveillance ordinance, the initial $1 million in the 2023 proposed budget was for the process systems of going through the surveillance impact report and identifying where the GDS pilot would be best suited in the Seattle area. The other inaccurate statement that was made was during the review of community perception towards the end of the presentation. It was said that there are apprehensions to the GDS pilot in Rainier Beach. And just like the previous statement, there has not been any geographical region of the city that has been identified where the potential pilot would be located. However, there does remain apprehensions from some community members across the city regarding a GDS pilot in general. So I want to make sure that is clear. But really the main focus of the correction needs to be that no geographical region has been identified for a GDS pilot, as well as the various breakdowns of the initial $1 million. But that is the end of my corrections, and I'm happy to take any questions before we move on.
Thank you, Logan. Not seeing any questions on that correction. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Felicia.
Thank you, Joel. So I am happy to present and introduce my friend, Lisa Broderick. Lisa is coming to us today. She is the founder and executive director of a organization, a nonprofit organization that's a national organization called Police to Peace. She leads this organization to help communities reimagine how they would like policing to be. She's done a huge amount of work in Portland with some of the Black clergy and some of the community leaders there in Portland surrounding, and you know, they just recently were working on, for instance, 2020, June 2020, after George Floyd's death, they've been working with the group of Rotarians, which Lisa and I share, the Rotary, and they wanted to address racism and the issues of police violence. So Lisa has worked with this the Saturday Racial Justice Group that meets, well, our group met at 9 o'clock each and every Saturday morning, and with over 200 members. And she's going to talk a little bit about the work that she has done with the interfaith Peace and Action Collaborative. They renamed it to the Portland Police Initiative, working with Pastor Matt Hennessy, who's very, very active in the Portland area. Unfortunately, Pastor Matt will not be able to be on the call today. Maybe we can bring him back some other time. But at this time, I will like to introduce you to Lisa. She'll talk about the work she's done in the Portland area. And just one little plug for Lisa. She has a book out called All the Time in the World, and it's an excellent book. And I advise anyone who is interested to look it up on Amazon.
I did not put Felicia up to that. Thank you so much.
That was my own little plug.
It was her own little plug. Yeah, another interest of mine, the nature of time. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here. We have actually been in and around Seattle for quite some time because we've been in Portland. And Police to Peace is a national nonprofit that's about 4 years old. We unite police departments and communities around programs that uplift and heal them. We deal with thousands of police departments around the nation. We've been in Portland for 2.5 years, since 2020, June 2020, right after George Floyd, when this in particular a Rotary group wanted to address racial inequality and racism within Portland and with the Police Bureau. We are made up of activists and police leaders. So we are half and half. Again, we're a national nonpartisan nonprofit, and we do have an experience with this issue. The issue we call is anticipating the harm of police-involved technologies on vulnerable communities. That's the issue. And so we have a specialty in that. We work around the nation in that. ShotSpotter, obviously, as a gun detection system, is a police-involved technology. And what we do is we look at the unanticipated harm. So the police may have a zero tolerance policy. What's the harm of that? Well, you know, they could anticipate that in advance. They could have hotspots policing in a single community. What's the harm in that? And with gun detection technology, what's the harm in that? So in Portland, the review of ShotSpotter, a gun detection technology, as you know, began earlier this year out of a group called FITCOG, and that is the Focused Intervention Team, the Citizens Oversight Group, and that was spawned out of IPAC. IPAC is an interfaith coalition led by Pastor Matt Hennessy, of which I'm part of leadership. And so what we do is we review all kinds of things around Portland to get a better result, to get what we call co-producing public safety. It doesn't have to be us versus them. It can just be us. In the words of an 18th century statesman who really founded community policing, Sir Robert Peel, the police is part of the community and the community is part of the police. So we go to ShotSpotter technology. There are pros and cons, I will say. I did send Felicia a report that was issued out of Portland. I hope you've had a chance to read it. If you haven't, you should. It was extremely well considered. This is a group which is completely unbiased with respect to the police. They simply wanted to know whether this would have a positive effect on the community. Now, Portland and Seattle, similar in some ways. Maybe Portland has more gun violence and Seattle has more houselessness, but really the two big northeast and northwestern star cities, right? The FitCog did recommend ShotSpotter for the Portland area. And so now they're looking at how to fund that with the Portland Police Bureau, et cetera. Here's what we would say. There are criticisms, which I'm sure you know. And one of the major criticisms by the Electronic Frontier Foundation is that it is not as accurate as the company suggests it is. And so let's say that you have a shot ring out and ShotSpotter identifies someone and they identify them incorrectly. That is the unanticipated harm of a police-involved technology. You just pinned something on someone using a technology and they didn't do it because the technology is not accurate. Now that has happened. And in fact, another very large police department, Chicago, the third largest in the nation, did use ShotSpotter. They had an analysis of it. You probably know that, and they did not recommend it. So there are other gun detection technologies. It's not like this is the only, if this were an iPhone, you know, or a smartphone, this is not the only smartphone. It is a good smartphone. It's very well funded. They have a lot of resources to provide a city like Seattle. I'm sure that they want your business. But, you know, again, here's our mantra, the unanticipated harm of police-involved technologies. What is that? And in the Portland report, they go through that in measure. In the recommendations, they would only recommend it. If you haven't read it, I can put it in the chat, or I'm sure Felicia can send it around. And that is, number one, the PPB, Portland Police Bureau, must collaborate with the city of Portland to develop and investigate the concerns, to improve and enhance data-driven tactics for identifying these people, right? There needs to be an ongoing implicit bias training for PPB. For what I just mentioned, and that is, if the technology is not accurate and it identifies the wrong person, then what? Implicit bias makes that much worse, right? The Portland Police Bureau has to conduct ongoing evaluation and mitigation of unintended consequences resulting from it. Here's an unintended consequences. You park it over, if you do a hotspots map of Seattle and you have gunshots in one community and it's a vulnerable community and you park this over that community, you've targeted the community. How would they feel? Right? What we recommend is a much broader approach. And that is, if you're going to do it everywhere. The problem is it's expensive. And so that makes it, you know, what it does is it exacerbates problems that may already exist. Why is that community the hotspot for gunshots? If you were to do a heat map, all of these other things, that's what we've been trying to unpack in Portland. And we're finally, after 2.5 years, we're getting somewhere with this new election and with funding that's been provided by the city to address the systemic reasons why the neighborhoods in Portland may have more gun violence than others. And ShotSpotter will be a part of that, but it's not the only solution. You can't just park a technology over a community and hope for the best. So they need to be able, Portland need to be able to terminate ShotSpotter at any time, right? And they need to collaborate with emergency service response. The other big issue in Portland is probably the same with you, and that is police response to non-emergency calls, mental health response. Portland has staged its own mental health response team. I'm sure that Seattle has one. In fact, I believe you have one within the SPD that does that. Portland's is a little more, is a little different than that. And that is, it's an actual non-governmental response team, which is more like the Gresham Whitebird model that you may know for, that was really a model for around the nation. So these are the type of considerations, you know, to think about where we are in America. Policing has changed. Policing is at a crossroads. The advent of smartphones and cell phone cameras and everything make each and every incident national news. And sometimes it's a narrative which creates social unrest in a way that's not fair to one person or the other. You never know. And so before, the police used to have days or even weeks to investigate a crime, know who was involved, alert the family, alert the victims around, the other victims around it, get statements, have legal counsel speak to victims and their families. Now it's immediate. And so when that happens, there's harm which comes from that on both sides, and sort of destabilization of public safety. Something like this, you wouldn't want to add to that. because of the technology and the precision of the technology. So that's what we would say. Police to Peace works around the nation. We do not have another ShotSpotter community right now, other than Portland. We do know a lot about it. There are a lot of other, police involved technologies, tasers and drones and license plate readers, and you name it. They're all in the same bucket. How do you deploy them in ways that do not do unintended harm to vulnerable communities? Because that's where you may use them most, and that may exacerbate problems which are simply collinear with the community, but not the cause of the community. So with that, I will turn it over to any questions. And Felicia, thanks so much for including us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa.
Are there any questions from any commissioners or anyone about the presentation we just had from Lisa?
I'd like to find out, the question is.
Hang on, Officer Mullins. We'll do Reverend Walden, and then we'll go to you. Go ahead.
I'd like to know, how long did it take to come up with the comprehensive overlay for having this, but also have a safety plan that comes out of the Portland Police Department? I mean, you have to have a safety plan or a community. We've heard from other people is that the city also has to look at the some of the reasons that the crime is happening, or gunshots are going off in some communities. Is it a food desert, or how much trauma is happening to the children? I mean, because none of these reports are taken consideration that what's happened to the children who have experienced gunshots all the time. I mean, that's what we heard the other night about what happens to children, and that if someone start hearing gunshots by the time they're 5 or 6 years old and not have any resolution, or not feel safe, or the family is not safe, then it says by the time the child is 16 years old, that child is carrying a gun because they need to feel safe. So it seems to me that you can have this technology, but the on the ground working with the families who were experiencing the gunshots all the time, has to be some kind of program in here. I mean, in that, because those are the future victims of ongoing violence in certain communities.
You are absolutely right, sir. And so Portland earlier this year announced a program to address just that. We were part of it. We're a city contractor the Portland Peace Initiative, which is our version of Police to Peace in Portland. It's a city contractor providing programs that do exactly that. What the city did, they provided millions of dollars to very small grassroots nonprofits doing all kinds of things, from mental health response to basketball to teaching kids all kinds of things, to trauma clinics for parents and children, in order to get at that issue as well. It was a pilot. It went very well. You can't just park a technology over a community and hope for the best. You have to fix the underlying problem. It would be like a doctor not just fixing your symptoms and not diagnosing you. The diagnosis is that all kinds of factors, and in fact, in Portland and around the nation, Police to Peace uses what's called risk and protective factors. You may have heard of it. It is a health policy model which is being applied to policing. One of our policing advisors actually pioneered it for use in policing. I can give Felicia the link and you can go ahead and look it up. It's where you identify the risk factors for gun violence, and then you identify the protective factors which protect against it ever happening. And then you do that. It was developed in the 50s to address lung cancer and heart disease. It's been very successful in public health. It's now being used in public safety. It is a really good idea. So this is one, ShotSpotter may be one of the protective factors against the trauma of children who are hearing gun violence, but it's not the only one. And also you need to go to the risk factors. What are the factors that bring about this in the first place in each child and each family's lives, so that you can help address that?
And I see Director Grant's hand is up, but Officer Mullins, go ahead with your question.
Yes. My question is, I heard the lady say that ShotSpotter identifies people. Can she clarify what she meant by that? Because my understanding of the technology is that this is echolocation, not necessarily personnel identification. It's telling us what direction police need to respond to to find out where the sound of shots fired came from, not an identifier. So can you explain what you meant by that?
I can, and thank you so much. That is a great question. So acoustic gunshot detection, it relies on a series of sensors, and they're mostly placed on lampposts or buildings. If a gunshot is fired, the sensors detect the specific acoustic signature of the gunshot and send the time and location to the police. The issue is who happens to be standing there, right? And so the location is gauged by measuring the amount of time it takes for the sound to reach the sensors in different locations. The criticism is that it is not accurate. And so it could send the police to a different location where someone is innocently standing there. And in the sense that you happen to be a bystander, it could identify you. Maybe it's not going to identify specifically, but if you're the only person there, it may. And that is the major criticism. The Electronic Frontier Foundation is pretty specific about this, and they've challenged the company, and the company has not been able to refute this. It's a consideration. The truth is there are pros and cons. I'm sorry, sir, would you like to say something else?
Okay, yes. And that means if there's someone standing there, officers are trained well enough to know what PC is. There are probably going to be some questions asked of that person if they're standing there. Basically, if they heard the shots or if they saw someone shooting a weapon. So what this technology, and I'm not touting, I agree with you when you say there are all kinds of cell phones. We don't have to choose one. I'm not advocating one company over another, but the technology not only assists us in finding locations where the shots were fired, but possibly victims who are down. Because let's face it, when we go to shots fired and people are actually hit, they're not always lying in the middle of the street so we can find them.
You're right. No,
They
this is
walk
an
off.
excellent point, right? And also,
They
it
walk
only
off.
yeah, go ahead.
They walk off. They go behind bushes. They fall in people's yards, and we may be 30 feet from them and not see them, or not see them for a while. So
You're right.
You pointed out that it's not as accurate as they claim, but it is a lot more accurate than probably 90% of the phone calls that we get from 911 who say they've heard a shot, but aren't really sure what direction or what location it is. It's in. Also, this gives us an opportunity for officers to approach a scene of shots fired in a more tactical and safe way.
Sure.
Not only are we finding victims, not only are we knowing location, not only are we knowing direction of bullet, and in some cases, being able to tell the caliber of the weapon, we can find those spent shells in a general, in that general direction. It doesn't have to be spot on, but at least we have something to go on. With just a phone call in 911, we have almost no idea where we're looking. We could be running over spent shells.
You're absolutely right. And so these are, again, we're not against it. We're neutral. We're half activists, community activists and leaders, and half police. Here's the issue. ShotSpotter only detects that there was a noise, right? And then one of their employees confirms that it was, listening over headphones, confirms that it was a shot fired. And so the issue is that in communities which may be over-policed, first of all, Chicago experienced a situation where shots fired were over 40,000 times, and they were dead end reports. That's why Chicago did not use it. No one was there. It was simply a dead end report. And the company could not refute that. The problem is that if you have a dead end report and police officers go to that, they could easily interpret anyone they encounter near the projected site of the loud noises as a threat, and it could easily result in civilian issues, right? Especially in over-policed communities. That's all I'm saying. It's a very even view. There are pros and cons. These types of technologies can be enormously valuable, and the consideration of the unintended harm that they may bring to vulnerable communities is a thought as well. So that was an excellent point.
I would implore you, ma'am, to show up to some of our community meetings, especially the ones in Rainier Beach, in which the citizens of that area are listening to what the balance between having it and not having it, and they're choosing for the most part to want it.
Oh, I agree. Portland did
Because-
too.
Because a lot of people in a lot of areas outside of that neighborhood don't know what these people are going through, and they're tired of hearing these shots fired and having people being shot.
Oh, I
So,
completely
I
agree.
think-
Portland is the same. Northeast Portland, Southeast
I
Portland,
live in
very
Portland. I
similar.
know Portland.
Yeah.
I've lived in Portland. I know Portland.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
it's a very similar situation. All we do is we bring an evenness to a review of this and a depth of a national view to help communities consider whether or not they like to do it.
Also, you said something about like the immediacy of the technology, which doesn't adhere to like investigations, statements, things of that nature. I disagree with you.
No, that had
I
nothing to
just-
do with this technology. That's just in general. That's just the police release of information, just a general observation about police releasing information. It had nothing to do with ShotSpotter.
Okay, well, I got confused there. I
Okay.
thought you were tying that to the technology.
No, it's just in general.
We
Cell
still
phones
have
and
to do
cameras.
investigations.
Absolutely. Cell phones and cameras result in, George Floyd happened around the world within an hour. That would not have happened 10 or 20 years ago. So we have an immediacy.
I agree with that, but
Yeah.
we still have to do reports and
Oh, sure.
investigations.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Officer Mullins. I see Executive Director Grant's hand is up. I'd like to just take the opportunity to make just a comment or an observation on the discussion we just had between Officer Mullins and Ms. Broderick. And that is with respect to communities that have been historically over-policed, one of the considerations that the City of Seattle's surveillance ordinance requires is an analysis of how the acquisition of a surveillance technology would impact such communities. My understanding is that Oakland has a similar surveillance ordinance as Seattle, and went through that process and ultimately adopted ShotSpotter. So just for the benefit of the group, I think it might be interesting to hear from Oakland, or to learn more about the process they went through to consider these issues. Anyway, so thank you for letting me make that comment. Executive Director Grant.
Thank you. Lisa, again, I want to thank you for joining us today. I just had a couple of, I don't know if they're more like observations or statements, but I was looking through the recommendation analysis that you provided for us, and so thank you for that. I noticed that FitCog requested certain conditions be met within this recommendation report. And there was something specific about making sure that there was equitable placing of these sensors to make sure that it was reflective of accurate gun data, right, of actual shots. I think that is really important. I'm glad to see that you all put forth in recommendations that you wanted to have certain conditions be met if they were going to have a gunshot detection system like this. How are you all being able to ensure that they're able to kind of fulfill this obligation? And then the statement part to that is, this really kind of points to, this is a multi-layered situation. This is not a just, gunshot detection system is going to be the only thing that's going to save lives. This is the layers of different people, community members, first responders, being able to collaboratively work together, public health officials, to make sure that we're saving lives, but also intervening as well too. So yeah, I just would love to hear you expound a little bit, for those who have not had an opportunity to read this report, about the conditions that you all put in place.
Yes, well, thank you. And the conditions came out of, again, IPAC, which is the Interfaith Peace and Action Collaborative. FitCog came out of that. FIT is the focused intervention team of the Portland Police Bureau. After George Floyd, the gun violence prevention team was eliminated by the city. And so there was no gun violence response in Portland for really quite some time, which in my opinion was devastating. So FitCog is now a focused intervention team. It's been restaged. It's just up and running this year. And COG is the citizens oversight group of the focused intervention team. They took on the task of reviewing ShotSpotter. And so in order to do that, it is a very community-centric, considerate group body, just as the Seattle Police Commission, right? Or the Citizens Commission that you have. So that it considered these, and it had these conditions, the conditions of which are in the report. I read some of them to you. There are many. let me see, it goes all the way to M like 20. And so the Portland Police Bureau has to work collaboratively. It had police bureau issues. It had a safety plan requirement. It had the, as you mentioned, Commissioner, it mentioned the placement of the technology. I don't know if that has been done. It hasn't been implemented. So I don't know how ShotSpotter is going to deal with that. But again, they're putting sensors on buildings and lampposts. Could they do it in a way that is more accurate? The criticism has been that it's inaccurate, and Chicago stopped using it for that reason. So that's a data point. Chicago is, certainly thought about it and implemented it and had some experience with it. Many communities do use it. I'm sure, like any technology, it's getting better. Does anybody remember the Motorola 3000 that weighed 5 pounds and had a little antenna out of the top, right? Can you imagine using that today? I had one. I looked like I came from Star Trek. Anyway, so that's kind of ShotSpotter. This technology could be great and it could be refined. And ShotSpotter certainly is so well resourced that it could do it. You had mentioned, Joel, speaking to Oakland, great idea. And I will go back and look at other communities that we work in to see whether they're considering it and consider them, and also connect with the FitCog, the group here that would like to consider that. Connect with Portland FitCog, the Citizens Oversight Group, as they continue to consider it. How did they replace the sensors, or were they able to make it more precise?
Thank you, Lisa. And I do want to be sensitive of time. It's 10:34, and we also have another guest, Pastor Hennessy. Oh,
no, Pastor Hennessy could not make it. I'm here in his stead.
Got it. Okay. Apologies for that. Well, with that, we
God
still
calling.
have,
sorry, just kidding.
We still have, thank you. Well, I'm glad we have more time then with you. Is there anyone else that has some additional questions or comments for Ms. Broderick while we have her here?
Just that we want to follow up about, I had another question about FitCog, but I believe it would probably be better served just to connect with him.
Mr. Brian Maxey has his hand up.
I saw that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm done.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, Executive Director Grant. Brian Maxey, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. And Ms. Broderick, thank you very much for your presentation and the information you're providing to the city. I have not received a copy of your report, but I would be very interested in reading it in more depth. I guess one question is, has your group looked at any of the other gunshot detection systems that are available in the market? And do you have opinions on any of those? In particular, Flock is one that's caught our attention recently.
Excellent point.
And the budget item, as I understand it, is product agnostic. It's essentially looking into what would best serve Seattle. So I know there's a lot of focus on ShotSpotter itself, but there are other available options. So that's a question. And then just a statement regarding the equity issue, because it's one that we're very, very concerned about here. Previously in this session, there was a retraction of statements previously made about how the GDS would be deployed in South Seattle. And it's correct that no decision has been made, but if it is evidence-based and you're looking where the shots are, that would heavily favor placing the system in South Seattle, as well as some corridors up on Aurora. If that is the basis of equity, that may have unintended impacts. And I know that's a lot about what we're discussing here, but we've also been looking at our surveys on communities that say that they are over-policed and communities that say they are under-policed and deprived of police resources. And they are the same communities that are saying those two things. So there is a tension with perceptions there. And my read on that is we have communities that are asking for correct and proportionate policing, and they don't believe they're getting that, whether it's for too few resources or too much, or getting too much of the wrong policing. But I'll stop talking. To my question on other systems, have you looked at them?
The answer is we're looking at them now for the same reasons you are. And that is, it's a cell phone. It might be the Motorola 3000, and let's go out and see what's in the market, right? And so because this is just a technology that has a name, It's not the only technology. And Flock, and there are many others, I can share that with you, what's being considered, but you know who they are. And there may be others which are more cost effective and have more advanced technology. Whenever you have a technology, it's a legacy technology. How do you improve it? That's not expensive. Whereas a new entrant into the market could have a completely different technology, do the same thing, and be able to provide it cheaper. And cost is an issue, as you know. It's not cheap. That's one issue. Number two is, as you may know, again, we are not against it. We do acknowledge that ShotSpotter can hear conversations. They can hear cell phone conversations. They have been part of at least 2 trials where audio voices recorded on acoustic gunshot detection systems were used in cases. They were admitted into evidence. That is a consideration, that the human employees of ShotSpotter can be listening to conversations on cell phones. So, we don't have a view of that. We're just, we're aware that it exists, and it's a consideration for public safety and for rights and for vulnerable communities and over police communities or communities who feel they are.
Thank you.
I have a question, Ms. Broderick. What is Portland's experience? Well, let me just back up. There has been a lot of focus in the discussion at the Community Police Commission in Seattle on the impact of a gunshot detection system on policing. And, that's like obviously the heart of what we're talking about and what the community is talking about. But I'm interested in what Portland's experience is with 911 response with the gunfire detection system and the impacts, if any, on response times towards helping victims, for example. Because it's not just who shot the gun, but who got shot with the gun, right? So
Sure.
I'm interested in kind of the other side of it. What is Portland's experience with that?
Well, it doesn't have experience. It hasn't implemented it. Number one. Number two, Portland is unique in a way. It may be the only city, although it just did have a form of government initiative on the ballot, where it was 5 commissioners and the mayor was a ceremonial commissioner. And the mayor was the police commissioner as well, because the mayor wanted to be the police commissioner, and the city is completely siloed in 5 silos, making 911 and emergency medical response really challenging. Recently, Mike Myers, who was the former fire chief, came over to sort of sort that out, but they're implementing a new 911 system, which has not been implemented. Also, unfortunately, Portland was defunded by $15 million after George Floyd by the city council, and its response times became, in my opinion, horrendously long. So the truth is, the jury's out. You can't know. Portland Police Bureau would very much like this to be different. It looks like the future is going to be different in terms of all of the factors that go into, emergency response times, which is absolutely crucial. Theoretically, and there's research around this, that of course, ShotSpotter, if you know that a shot was fired and it was indeed a shot, you can get to a victim sooner if in fact there is one. Portland just doesn't have any direct experience with that yet.
What was that a consideration in the FitCogs analysis?
I don't think so, because there are so many other issues. I didn't see it in the report, and I didn't hear it talked about. Honestly, the response times in Portland became so challenging, during the pandemic and after the pandemic, and with defunding and everything else. It just, that was an issue that was going to be fixed in other ways first, and then ShotSpotter could hopefully make it better.
Is there anyone else that has any questions or comments that they'd like to raise in today's meeting while we have Ms. Broderick? Officer Mullins.
I keep hearing the notion that neighborhoods are over policed, and I understand the concern, but at this point in time, as Ms. Broderick had brought up, Seattle Police Department has also been defunded, and we've lost a lot of officers, and we don't have that problem of neighborhoods being over policed because we don't have the officers to even fill the watches. So in the areas in which people are saying that they're being over policed, I understand the perception, but it's not a reality because we're barely filling our rosters, especially on third watch and other watches. Second watch, we're always augmenting to fill the spaces of officers who aren't there. So over policing, it's not happening right now.
Yeah, well, I know why you, I can see why you feel that way. What we actually do police training around the nation, and in at police as peace officers. It's our fundamental core program. And so what we train police leaders and police officers is the community's perception is your reality. It is. And so that's the new normal. So that what they perceive is the police's reality, and that to acknowledge that and deal with that, even if it's not true from your perspective, is a wise approach, because the community is going to react based on its perception. Even if the facts don't support it, they still feel that way. So that's our view.
And I'm sensitive to the way they feel. I do want people to feel protected, and I don't want people to fear the police fear the police. But I'm just telling you what the actual reality is. It's that there's no way we can over police any neighborhood because we don't have the police.
Right.
Even if we wanted to, it's just not going to happen.
Reverend Walden.
Another reason why we need the technology is because we don't have a whole lot of officers. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Reverend Walden has raised your hand. Go ahead, Reverend Walden.
Thank you for that comment about your reality. Because when we first started, I stepped away from the chair. I'm the founder of Mothers for Police Accountability. When we started 33 years ago, we always acknowledged that whatever the person was seeing, that was that person's reality. And that seems to have not shifted. But also, I just want to have a comment about communities that might be perceiving to be over policed. They also underserved in a lot of other reasons. A lot of places they might not have jobs, or they could have a high crime rate in a lot of areas. I know in a lot of places where this might be happening, it's a lot of theft in the grocery stores. I mean, so you have a lot of other things that's going on. It might be a food desert. So there's a lot of other things that's going on in these communities where the notion of being over police, and then you also have the same community that's being underserved in some of the areas that need to be, whether the schools are not good, or it's not enough food in the community, or the elderly people not being served, getting the service. We put a survey together. We've surveyed 1,500 people in the Seattle area, all African Americans, and most people know somebody who's been assaulted. Most people know somebody with a gun, and most of the people say they don't feel safe to go outside their door. I mean, and these are coming out of communities where people say where they feel over policed, but they're underserved. Thanks.
Thank you, Reverend Walden. Is there anyone else that has any questions or comment on this discussion today? Okay. Well, we are approaching the end of the agenda. We're a few minutes shy of where we expected to be. So, but we've also had a very robust discussion on a number of budget items today. I want to thank Lisa Broderick for being here today and participating in today's meeting, and also each commissioner who showed up today and had some very good questions and comments. Thank you, everyone. Unless there's anything else, I'm happy.
Updates from anybody, so they might not. Okay.
Yeah, okay, we were just wondering if there's any additional updates. We are happy to give everyone back 13 minutes of their day this morning. Is there anyone who has anything else to add to today's meeting?
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having
showing up.
me.
The next
An honor.
CPC meeting will be on Wednesday, December 7. That's in 3 weeks. Wednesday, December 7. Everyone have a very safe and happy Thanksgiving holiday, and we will see you back in 3 weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
That's a good presentation.
That was good.